Okay, I was just going to do a little quick introduction before Peter got going. The main reason I'm sitting here today is to build him over the head if he does try to introduce too much at once. So if we get going there, Pete. Actually. Yeah, okay. So in V11, we've introduced an awful lot into the MTF, the apply, and the possibilities that are for the future. And we've had to be very incremental about the way we're showing this to you. It's there's just a lot in there and there's a lot to learn. And like we're saying here, you can still do things in completely the old V10 way. However, there's an entirely new route you can take with the modifiers for V11. And yes, as we said, it's pretty vast what's in there, so hence these sessions are not being repeated like Synergy. Every single one of the design sessions will be completely and utterly different, and we'll probably struggle even then to get through all the stuff. And yes, of course, just feel free to pin us down at any time, and of course this time we will have that Q&A session on the last day, so if there's unanswered questions, we'll be sitting around if anyone's really interested. So I thought the first thing I'd do today, just before Pete got going, is to run through the fundamentals of how the whole 12D system worked, because I think it's rather critical that people fully understand where it came from to how it is now. Yeah, just straightforward, just a reinforcement of the basic concepts, because I've seen it in this V11 design process where a few people have forgotten some of those little rules, and as I say here, it's even the most experienced people, just I think as we go over the next couple of days, just need to remember all those basics. And yes, what I'm about to show or go through is not the complete truth anymore, but I think it's close enough to the truth for everybody. So yeah, as I said, way back we had templates. That's what 12D was, it had a template. This was the original stuff. As I said, you remember the templates? So just a bunch of links, you could apply them on the left-hand side of the road or the right-hand side of the road. You could use templates on their own or they could be interpolated. That was really sexy way back then. And just to remind everybody, we've got links. Now, a template was comprised of links, and as we went through Lee's introduction this morning, a link you could define by either the combination of slope, height or width, two out of the three. And it's as simple as that. That's all 12D still basically is for a lot of this stuff. It's a link. And the other very clear thing to remember with links, they are completely relative to the previous link. Now, remember with things like experience, even when you use something like the insert absolute modifier, it might have been inserted to a link that was 3 or 4 previous relative to it, but at the end of the day, it's evaluated to be, anyway, it's not that big number, it's the little number, it's all been resolved back to relative. And it's very important to remember that after that, if you do any modification on any link inside, everything on the outside would be pushed out relative. It's just one of those little concepts that must be absolutely clear. Now, the 12D were much more than a simple template. If you ever used other software like I did, all we had was a template. It just had a bunch of links and that's all it was. The important thing with the 12D one was, and this is still critically important now, it's got the 5 bits, the fixed, decisional, cut, fill and final. From the very original 12D to even when you work now, this is essentially still the same data structure that you work with. Now, as we all know, the templates were a very powerful tool in their day for just quickly blatting through a design job. Bang, bang, bang. But when you went to go into detailed design, they weren't so crash hot. So, next one, Pete. They introduced modifiers. And the idea of the modifiers were that they gave you 3 basic abilities. You could change the value of a link in the template, e.g. you wanted to alter the super elevation on the road, you wanted to make it wider, you wanted to make it narrower. With the modifiers you could create new links, and with the modifiers you could remove links. And the beauty of the modifiers, they could work on fix, cut, fill, final. So as I said, then you got that weird situation that the template-based system didn't actually need a template anymore. You could do the whole thing through modifiers. So, just to remind everybody, what happens when you actually do an apply? The first thing 12D does is it locates the hinge. It's very critical. It doesn't use the center line. The center line's just a starting point. You optionally can find a hinge. Once it's found the hinge, you can modify the hinge. That's, some people already forgotten that sort of stuff happens. Once it's located the hinge point, that's an X, Y, Z and direction. It then goes to look, see if you've nominated a template. If you've got a template, you might have another template. You're doing the old style, you're interpolating between them. If it doesn't have a template, what it actually does is it will create a dummy template at that section, and then it will use the modifiers in that dummy template. So this is where the modifiers came in. It would insert, it would super elevate, do all the other bits and pieces. So basically the fixed modifiers are executed. Then 12D executes the decisional templates. That's where you've got the, everyone's well aware of that. After the decisions were finished, I think, well, originally after the decisions were finished, you went to the final, but in V9, we allowed you to go from the decisions to the cut and fill. And then you went to the final part of the template where you did the interface. Now, and after obviously that, then all the other things happened afterwards. Whoops. All right. So yeah. After the templates were applied, then all the rest of the things were done, the boxing, the formation, the strings, tins, polygons, blah, blah, blah. Now, again, everyone would have seen it and had to explain it to people. None of those stages were re-entrant. Once you'd done fixed modifiers and you went to the decisions, that was it. You couldn't go back and modify anything again. And this is one of the very important things as we move into V11 and why we've made some of the modifications we've made. Okay, so then just a rough history of the design. V9 was where things started to change after a fair amount of period. We had the beginning of the smart changes. I think in V9 you could get start of other string, end of other, a couple of the basic smart changes. In V9 we allowed you to insert templates inside the modifiers. So you could take a fixed part of another template and insert it into your current template that you're working with. This is where people start to go, oh, I've got a template for a curb, I've got a template for a footpath. As said, by V9, the templates and the modifiers were basically completely interchangeable. So now I think everyone's well aware of that. And as the last little bit points out there, you could see the days of templates were becoming a little bit numbered. V10, we made a lot of changes in V10. We had the full range of smart changes. In V10, you basically could go change-free design. In V10, very importantly, as Lee mentioned this morning, we started to relax that definition of the link. If you defined it by slope and height, that was all you could modify it for. And a few of the new options in V10 started to support that. The super important one in V10 was previously the sections were basically independent. By V10 we had all those modifiers like the 2RL where you say, between this link and this link I want an exact grade between these two. So basically by V10, whole swathe of modifiers were very interdependent for those exact calculations. Obviously in V10 we put a lot of boxing enhancements in, and of course in V10 snippets, and snippets will go on in the next couple of days, but we're all well aware of what happens there. And yeah, lessons learnt when we approached V11. It was the case that snippets were meant that the old templates were becoming less important. The one reason you still needed templates in V10 was, say, transition between two curb and gutter shapes. You still couldn't do that. Design, it was becoming increasingly clear that we wanted to do all the design in the fixed part of the template. Remember, the order of execution, it was like, well, once we went to the decisionals, we couldn't come back in the fix. So it was like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to do the decisions inside the fixed part of the template? We needed the ability to have more than one layer at once. We didn't want to just have a single design layer. It was like, oh, it would be very nice if we could operate with other layers at the same time. That way we could do something in the top layer and make it relative to something in another layer. We could have construction strings. We could do all sorts of things. Another thing that became clear, that there were a lot of settings that were part of the apply. There are other things. What we thought was a lot of the settings should come back in the MTF itself, that in the MTF you would decree where strings are written to, where models are from, other bits and settings, not things that were part of environment variables. We'd move environment variables into the MTF so the whole thing was more portable. We noticed that fixed modifiers were only missing a few boxing commands. It was like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to go to boxing? We could do that all inside the fixed part of the MTF. And finally, we'd also like to do 3D objects. And so basically that was just the quick intro I wanted to do today. Remind everybody how the system worked, how it's come to where it is, and why we've taken the path we've taken to V11.